The audience was unprepared for this. When Jasmine went live late last night, the internet immediately realized that something was totally wrong, even though they thought they had seen every situation this reality show could have. Gorgeous, upset, and obviously trying not to cry. The remarks were coming in at a breakneck speed. Her hands were trembling, she looked nervous, and the heavy quiet that preceded her words was louder than any yelling bout we had ever seen on TV. Then came the stunning moment when she smiled through her tears and put her palm right on her stomach, leaving the crowd dumbfounded. Jasmine spoke the things her fans have been discussing and obsessing about for months. Yes, she is pregnant again. The supporters were right all along, in fact. In a matter of seconds, the most outrageous internet rumors were formally confirmed. However, this is not only a new chapter in her disorganized, chaotic life. For weeks, there have been rumors that Jasmine's second child is the missing piece in a much bigger, darker puzzle. Fans closely watched every hint because they were positive that Kirk, the man Jasmine had once declared she was done with forever, was still very much involved in her life. They improved shaky screenshots, examined previous interviews, and kept an eye on removed posts. After this one devastating discovery, all of those terrible assumptions feel terrifyingly accurate. However, this is where the real drama begins. Who is the true father? Music, will Kirk soon receive the ultimate reality check? Or is the internet about to be rocked by an entirely new narrative twist? We are currently delving further into the web of lies, so stay tuned. Let's examine who is actually standing in the middle of this smoldering debris in order to fully comprehend the scope of this bombshell. The indisputable king and queen of toxic reality TV dynamics, Jasmine and Kirk, are the subject of our discussion. Although these two have provided us with years of back-and-forth drama, this particular scenario goes beyond all the bounds of typical messy behavior that we have ever discussed on this channel. Being honest, unvarnished, and even dangerously dirty has been the foundation of Jasmine's entire brand. Kirk, however, is a completely other kind of monster on reality TV. He is the one who has perfected the art of public denial. The man who, as the world is watching the sky burn blue behind him, stares straight into a camera lens and tells millions of people that the sky is green. These two have a tangled history. It is an actual roadmap for social media manipulation, music, erased Instagram receipts, and late-night block parties. Music, every major blog and comment area on the internet ridiculed Jasmine mercilessly for months. People accused her of trying to trap a man who obviously didn't want anything to do with her in the public eye, called her a liar, and said she was following a plot. In the meantime, Kirk was portraying himself as the carefree single bachelor, sharing photos of his purportedly lonely evenings and subtly disparaging Jasmine whenever producers mentioned her. He wanted everyone to think he was totally unaffected by her mayhem, totally innocent, and totally preoccupied with his own personal brand. However, the public has a very long memory when it comes to the hypocrisy of reality television, and the internet always retains receipts. Jasmine did more than simply reveal her pregnancy when she delivered that live stream bomb. She successfully exposed Kirk's entire meticulously built lie business. Millions of people clicked from her live broadcast to Kirk's page to see how he would spin this catastrophe, and you could practically hear their collective gasp. The immediate following was sheer chaos, with producers virtually drooling over the enormous ratings spike this would bring to the next season and industry insiders rushing to obtain the first exclusive comment. Inside Jasmine's quiet suburban living room, behind closed doors. But there was a palpable sense of unease and the realization that her life had just undergone a lasting transformation. The phone on her marble coffee table was vibrating so loudly that it was almost falling off the edge. It was lit up with calls coming in one after the other from reality star coworkers, distant family members, and executive producers who wanted the inside scoop. Jasmine was utterly oblivious to the digital storm she had just unleashed on the world as she sat there gazing at the flashing screen. She was aware that she was waging war on Kirk's entire story the moment she placed her palm on her stomach and grinned for those cameras. Her sister Maya, who appeared to be the epitome of a "I told you so" moment, was pacing back and forth across the room with her arms crossed over her chest. Jasmine was too tired to continue playing the silent victim, despite Mia's weeks-long warnings that any hint of Kirk's involvement would result in a complete nuclear explosion in their social circles. Glancing up at her sister, Jasmine said that she was sick of being kept like a nasty secret. She was fed up with allowing Kirk to defend his public image while millions of strangers on the internet were dragging her own character through the mud. At that precise moment, Kirk was pacing his living room like a trapped animal in a high-rise luxury apartment across town, living out his own particular nightmare. He was holding his phone with enough power to break the glass screen, and his jaw was clenched so firmly that his teeth were hurting. Devin, a good friend of his, sat calmly sipping a drink at the kitchen island, observing the entire meltdown with a mix of sympathy and laughter. Devin only arched an eyebrow and reminded Kirk that he was the one who initially chose to deny everything when he began yelling about how Jasmine had broken their private agreements. Kirk vigorously defended himself, claiming that although names were never uttered on the live stream, they both understood that the public could make the apparent connections without a literal name drop. Kirk's primary argument was that they had committed to shielding the child from the destructive cycle of reality TV stardom. However, he sensed that something more was lurking in the shadows, so his terror was evident. This timeline was associated with a secondary secret that had not yet been disclosed to the blogosphere. And this difficult pregnancy would become a full-fledged career-ending disaster for him if that particular piece of information ever came to light. In the meantime, the digital investigators on TikTok and Twitter were already working diligently to piece together this broken puzzle with startling precision. They started retrieving old vacation pictures from precisely 7 months ago, comparing a random background blur in one of Kirk's deleted birthday postings to the interior design of an opulent resort in Mexico. The exact window of time when Kirk claimed to be traveling alone on a spiritual retreat to discover himself was revealed by the timeline's flawless alignment. The followers were unrelenting, calling him a pathological liar and sharing memes of his earlier TV denials in addition to the recently found geographic proof. People who had spent years attempting to present a united front for the media experienced severe rifts as a result of the public outcry, which quickly spread to their own families. According to reports, Kirk's mother, Linda, was sitting in her house watching the live stream clip that she had downloaded on repeat, her face getting colder with each repetition. When she did eventually speak with an insider, she dismissed Jasmine as a cunning attention seeker who was only using her pregnancy as a weapon to remain relevant on television. Her tone was dangerously calm. On the opposite side of the fence, Jasmine's mother was sobbing uncontrollably. She was torn between being terrified of Kirk's affluent team's impending legal reprisal and being incredibly relieved that her daughter was finally speaking her truth. Later that night, the tension reached a breaking point when Kirk eventually swallowed his pride and called Jasmine. The moment she picked up, his voice fell to a menacing whisper. Reminding her of a serious pledge she had made months earlier to keep their private matters out of the spotlight, he immediately accused her of turning their private life into a cheap public circus. With a bitter, hollow laugh that reverberated down the line, Jasmine retorted that all she had vowed was to stop lying. He was the one who had been the principal clown for the past year if the reality appeared to be a circus. The television networks were already organizing their production teams to take advantage of the tragedy as the phone conversation turned into a heated argument about betrayal and control. Producers were actively contacting both parties, offering substantial cash rewards for a sit-down interview and guaranteeing that the person who spoke first would have total control over the season finale's storyline. Rumors that there was a secret trove of erased voice notes, text messages, and security camera footage from a covert meeting that took place long after their formal public split were revealed by insiders. Watching the city lights flicker through her tears, Jasmine stood by the window of her living room. She could sense that Kirk and his influential family were already planning a big counteroffensive to safeguard their resources and public image, knowing deep down that this early surge of online rumors was really the quiet before the utter storm. Following her gut, by the time the sun rose the following morning, The main entertainment blogs had already published highly editorialized headlines that Jasmine had never approved of, changing the story from one of a mother defending her child to one of a planned scheme to ruin a man's livelihood. Sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at his name, and trending at the top of the social media charts for all the worst reasons imaginable, Kirk had not slept a wink. All of his previous transgressions, past infidelity scandals, and old court records from his previous relationships were being brought back into the public eye. In a trial, I prefer newly introduced evidence. Upon entering the bedroom and observing his friend's disheveled appearance, Devon told him rather clearly that he could no longer sit in the dark and pretend that this enormous public outcry would simply go away overnight. With bloodshot eyes, entirely devoid of his normal haughtiness, Kirk looked up and inquired what he should do if he could no longer avoid the truth. Devon inhaled deeply and slowly, met Kirk's gaze directly, and informed him that the only thing left to do was to convey the truth, that is, a very polished version of it. He counseled Kirk to be just honest enough to divert attention from the more significant secrets he was frantically attempting to conceal. Staring blankly at the floor of his opulent bedroom, Kirk realized that his usual strategy of total denial was completely ineffective in the face of the overwhelming amount of evidence he was facing online. He was aware that Jasmine and the network would write his story entirely for him if he did not make a comment quickly, leaving him with no chance to save his remaining business ties. Jasmine was getting ready for a major showdown with the television network's top executives, while Kirk was drowning in fear across town. Instead of going to her planned promotional picture session that afternoon, she ended up sitting in a chilly, sterile conference room with 3 elite producers who could sniff a ratings gold mine. They showed little concern for her psychological health or the strain this circumstance was putting on her pregnancy. Their sole concerns were obtaining the exclusive rights to her first formal breakdown on video and completing the legal papers. Leaning across the table and speaking in a deceptive whisper, one of the lead producers warned Jasmine that they would not be able to shield her from Kirk's impending public defense unless she provided them with precise information. Jasmine told the executives that she was no longer interested in defending herself while keeping both of her hands firmly over her stomach and giving them a cold, uncompromising glare. She was quite clear that her top concern going forward was to keep her unborn child safe from the same industry that had been taking advantage of her personal connections for years in order to make money. Before the head executive, music, delivered a sad piece of news that made Jasmine's chest tighten like a vice, the producers exchanged a knowing glance. He told her that their internal legal team had just learned that Kirk was working with his own PR agency to prepare a huge public statement, and that his version of events was intended to entirely obscure the pregnancy's date. To cover up the instant rush of terror that swept over her, Jasmine laughed cruelly and sharply. That same evening, after realizing that Kirk was moving precisely as she had anticipated, Kirk's legal and publicity teams formally published a carefully crafted statement on all major entertainment channels that was intended to raise suspicions without naming specific individuals. According to the statement, Kirk had always been a man of integrity who valued the sanctity of family and music, but he would not put up with the use of fictitious timeframes as a weapon for television ratings. The public's response to his article was immediate and sharply divided. Thousands of people rushed his comment area, labeling the entire remark a classic example of corporate manipulation, while some supporters praised his adult moderation. After reading the statement 3 times on her phone while sitting on her couch, Jasmine slammed the gadget onto the cushions out of sheer disdain. Maya, her sister, who had been observing her intently from the kitchen counter, slowly shook her head and said that Kirk wasn't merely protecting himself. Music, he was aggressively getting ready for a major court case involving character and custody. Maya alerted Jasmine to the fact that Linda, Kirk's mother, was already operating in the background, contacting powerful relatives and media 3 contacts to disseminate false information regarding Jasmine's mental health. In an attempt to create a story that would benefit Kirk in any future family court procedures, Linda allegedly told anyone who would listen that Jasmine was just too emotional to be trusted during the months preceding the pregnancy. But Kirk's constant deceit was causing his own family's internal structure to crumble, especially with regard to his sister, who refused to accept the corporate lies. Linda attempted to make everyone sign a non-disclosure agreement during a very contentious family phone call in order to stop any unintentional leaks to the entertainment media. Linda became enraged and accused her own daughter of abandoning the family legacy after Kirk's sister flatly refused to comply with her mother's demands, saying that timelines and future DNA testing are truthful. The conflict intensified until Kirk's sister formally severed ties with the family, isolating Kirk from the one person who had always kept him grounded. Later that night, when the security bell at Jasmine's private home started to ring non-stop, the drama took a horrifyingly personal turn. When Maya noticed Kirk's face on the security monitor, she hurried to the intercom and tried to turn him away right away. However, Jasmine moved forward and waved her sister away with a determined expression. The moment Kirk entered the house via the front door without his typical lavish entourage and his self-assured broadcast demeanor, the entire mood changed. There were no cameras, no excited producers, and no yelling spectators for the first time in months. Just two shattered individuals stood in front of the enormous ruins of the life they had created together. With his clothes rumpled and his eyes bloodshot, Kirk stood in the hallway and quietly told Jasmine that he was totally unprepared for the reality of this situation. With a voice full of tiredness, Jasmine pointed to her stomach and reminded him that this was her real life and their child's future, not a made-up storyline for a TV drama. The yelling altercations that viewers were accustomed to witnessing on screen were absent from the altercation. Rather, it concluded with a thick, oppressive fatigue that seemed to deplete the room's vitality. With a menacing, dark expression, Kirk turned to face Jasmine before heading out of the house, giving her one last warning not to push his hand in public. Knowing exactly what that ambiguous threat meant for her impending legal strategy, Jasmine's heart raced as she watched the heavy front door click shut. Music. A few days later, a series of extremely sensitive screenshots purportedly showing Kirk pleading with Jasmine to postpone her pregnancy announcement were released by a well-known celebrity blog, causing the internet to blow up once more. Contrary to the corporate statement his PR staff had issued just days earlier, the hacked messages showed that Kirk was fully aware of the timeline. The fans were shocked by the text message's blatant dishonesty, and Kirk's side started accusing Jasmine's camp of disclosing personal information in order to damage his reputation right away. In order to resolve the unexpected release of the private text conversations, the network producers immediately took advantage of the situation and called Jasmine in for an emergency meeting. They warned Jasmine that someone in her close circle might be working against her behind her back, even though they claimed that their industry contacts had confirmed the screenshot's veracity. Feeling extremely ill to her stomach, Jasmine vehemently claimed that she had not disclosed any documents to the media in order to maintain the integrity of the court procedures. With a sympathetic nod, the producer revealed that the leak had come from someone close to Kirk who wanted to make him stop lying, not from her camp at all. Devon's phone was ringing non-stop from media outlets across town. However, he ignored them entirely and fixed his gaze on Kirk, who was sitting quietly on the couch. Music. Devon pushed Kirk until he finally gave in and said that he had revealed those particular texts to his sister during their heated disagreement, demanding to know if he had shared them with anybody else. Kirk was horrified to learn that his own sister had leaked the screenshots to the blogs in an attempt to demolish his web of public denials. Kirk became so enraged that he called his sister and yelled at her for disclosing his personal life. However, she swiftly replied by claiming that she was only protecting him from his own harmful actions. As the call came to an end, Kirk aggressively slammed his smartphone against his apartment's brick wall, smashing the screen into a million tiny fragments that reflected the complete devastation of his public persona. In the meantime, Jasmine was sitting in her foremother's kitchen, silently observing the never-ending barrage of encouraging remarks from women worldwide who were commending her for sticking up for what she believed in. Glancing up from her own tablet, Jasmine's mother made a quiet remark about how unfair it was that the male was able to hide behind pricey solicitors while the lady was constantly required to present an unending amount of evidence.